All right, here we are, chapter 16. I'm only doing one chapter today because it's a long chapter and actually has quite a bit, because we're doing the Sparrows. And we're finally to all the Sparrows. We met Warbeak already, but now we're in the Sparrow world. Um, so, yeah, I wanted to go into detail on this chapter mainly because there's a lot going on, some backstory stuff being described, Matthias's plans, understanding the character of King Bull Sparrow, Dunwig, all that sort of stuff. So I wanted to get into that because all this is kind of new to us rather than a lot of stuff that we at least have some familiarity with. Of course, the newest thing being, of course, we still have Matthias, but Matthias gets stuff to do in terms of how he acts and all that sort of stuff. So there's a lot to talk. Let's see here. Where should we begin with? So we have Matthias captured. Um, he pretends to be crazy, so King Bull Sparrow will like him, but he soon realizes that King Bull Sparrow probably has the sword, so he's plotting and biding his time uh, to figure out how to get the sword back. But of course, it turns out that he doesn't have the sword. The sword was taken by the Adder, which we've already met, and but he still has the scabbard for the sword, so he figured that at least I should try and get. So he's going to wait and bide his time to get both back, the scabbard and the belt, even though he already has the belt, but then he gives it away. So there's a bit of stuff going on there. But we won't talk about this chapter a lot because, again, there's a lot of stuff. King Bull Sparrow is really fun. It's very clear that he's just like a really crazed but not stupid tyrant. Um, he's reminiscent of a lot of course, tyrants throughout history is kind of what he represents, and kind of his madness and his kind of laziness. And again, we kind of have the same thing with Clooney, where he doesn't really care about his fellow um, sparrows, and it kind of this time and it even trickles down to where there's like a lot of infighting between the sparrows. They don't seem to really get along. Like they probably once were much more united and much more of a force to be reckoned with, but now because um, Kimball Sparrow, all he cares about is his own self-esteem and prompting himself up, they also kind of have lost um, any sense of any real warrior nature. Like their warrior nature's there, but it's almost like um, it's been sort of like diluted by kind of laziness, incompetence in general, just not any real bravery, just false bravery and pretending as if he has some sort of real power or might or any wisdom or anything worthy of admiration. So it's pretty much, it seems like, in some sense, the Sparrow Society is broken down, especially with the loss of the sword, because now he has nothing. He doesn't even have the sword to at least command any real power. So now it's kind of like, well, I gotta pretend even though I have nothing. Nothing, not even a sword to show off how powerful I am. So that's kind of interesting with King Bull Sparrow's character, is basically it's all just a facade, really. Um, but Dong rightly points out that he's still not dumb, though. He's not an idiot, and he's very cruel and vicious, and like a lot of people throughout history who um, are somewhat crazed. They're not crazed to the point of stupidity. They're more just paranoid. But their paranoia doesn't mean they often means they often see things that details that can easily get anybody just tipped off. They're it's just that their threshold level for such um, realizations is much lower, but it's heightened by paranoia that may not actually exist on the scale they think it does. So they're not stupid. And so that's an important thing to keep in mind. Um, Dunwing, I really like. I had forgotten much of Dunwing in this chapter and in this story. I remember much more of Warbeak and Kimball Sparrow, but Dunwing I had kind of forgotten. I knew she had a role, but I had forgotten how much she tells Matthias, how much she reveals to Matthias, her attitude, and she's very much like this very insightful motherly figure. This character who has both wisdom and sense, but is also very sensitive and caring. And so we see that the difference between what Sparrow Society is currently and what it could be, where you still have the warrior kind of nature of sparrows, but it's intermixed with sense um, and wisdom that King Bullsburg doesn't really have. And again, wisdom doesn't equal um, smarts necessarily. Um, so I like all that with Dungwing. I like I like even little details about even like the difference even in how even the bad sparrows behave, like the difference between Bloodhawk and Wingplume, where Wingplume actually seems to have at least some recognition of Matthias's spunk, and he has a bit more care in what he says and does. Well, Bloodhawk is just vicious. So even that kind of small little interaction between the three of them for brief is really nice. Um, uh, we get also kind of like we we sort of got it with the way um, Warby talked and all that stuff, but we really get a sense of also Sparrow language and how that kind of fits in with kind of the character and nature. Like calling all enemies worms is really kind of interesting. Like the nature, it's almost again that kind of thing where um they just throw it in because they don't have a word or they don't know how to fully communicate. It's not again because they're stupid or because they don't have any words. It's just like they just do it naturally out of the way that they can't fully communicate everything in the same way that Matthias can. Um, and so those kind of fit in nicely and also kind of go with what I was talking about birds being kind of like these in between the natural world and being fully integrated into the world of Redwall mice and hares, where they kind of inhabit this kind of middle world, um, and often. So I like all that, especially with some of these lower birds like sparrows. But again, we can see that there is um, ways they operate that just Matthias is unfamiliar with as well. So um, just eating insects is just so foreign to Matthias, he doesn't understand it. But we also have the kind of idea of cradling nest and taking care of the nest, and that's kind of what what also sets Dunwing apart is there's a sense of like there's something that matters more than just being fierce. Again, fierce warriors. That there's something else that they have to take care of, which is their eggs. Right? Eggs are the life. Their eggs and their chicks are their lifeblood. And Bull Sparrow doesn't really seem to care about that all that much. He's pretty nonchalant to any of that. And so long as you don't tick him off, he doesn't really seem to care about any of the other stuff. Um, so there's that. I also like one of the things I've always liked about interestingly, this is one connection kind of between um, though there I guess never mind. It's just funny to me like the descriptive names that a lot of these animals use to describe themselves. It's kind of funny like that like there are some even of the Redwall characters, especially if they're bear badgers or otters, and sometimes hedgehogs as well. Um the descriptive names, so I like all the uh uh really just like descriptive names that Brian Jason. I brought up Winged Plume and Bloodhawk. I like Bloodfeather, really cool name for a leader. Um, King Bull Sparrow, great name. So I love the naming conventions in Redwall. That's another thing to bring up sometimes, names in Redwall, because it's very interesting how he does that sometimes. How some names are very familiar to us, like Matthias, but then we also have character names that are very descriptive, especially among birds and vermin. But we get it elsewhere too, so it's kind of that'd be a fun thing to discuss sometime. Let's see. So then we also have the um backstory stuff, and what I like about the backstory stuff again is it again reveals kind of the the degradation of, as I mentioned, the sparrows as a thing. Uh, where we have Greytail who's this very heroic, very brave, willing to sacrifice himself for his king, um, very truthful, honest, cared for his wife and daughter, um, but we have again Kimblesburn not really seeming to care so long as it doesn't make him look bad. Um, and so it really I like that backstory because it sums up everything that I've been saying. And so we see that that how King Bullspear has slowly destroyed Sparrow Society just by this one story. That it's not that that it wasn't always this way, and that you even get a sense like for the way they talk about Bloodfeather too, where Bloodfeather was probably actually a warrior. Um, Greytail was more of a soldier, but Bloodfeather was the warrior that leader that they should have had. And there's even it seems like some question of what happened to Bloodfeather. It's like Bloodfeather suddenly died. I find that really interesting. They didn't say how Bloodfeather dies, so I find that really fascinating. Yeah. Uh, so the other main thing we have in this story is beyond all the society of the sparrows is we have um the plot of Matthias, and I love the plot nature of this trickster kind of and that's one of the things I really like about Brian Jacques at times. Um, and really good fantasy stories especially do this is you have the tricking and the waiting. The waiting can be just as great as the great battles. And so we have Matthias slowly planning, slowly uh, doing those things necessary to get King Bolesper to at least keep him alive. So we have him keeping the chestnuts for a while, which is really clever. That way it spreads it out more thinly. We have Matthias at the end giving away even the belt, showing how much Matthias is willing to sacrifice in order to get what he really wants. And so we have that. In the story. We have him pretending to be crazed. We have him being willing to at least endure the hardship of wearing the neck collar. Um, and his realization, and it comes to the realization that he's not going to ever put a collar on even Warbeak again. So love all that. And so it reveals things about Matthias' character, how he's evolving, the patience he's willing to endure, hardship, right? And that he also is still growing this friendship between him and Warbeak and him and Dunwig. And so we have all that, and that's really, really nice. That we have these building of relationships that Matthias cultivates, um, uh, union between different, very different creatures. We have a meeting Basil originally. We have now the Sparrows, and there's going to be one more major group that Matthias is going to bring in later. And so um, that'll be great. And so what we have here is Matthias, again, slowly growing his repertoire as a warrior, that being warriors, again, more than the brute strength, um, getting the sword, that he develops skills that allow him to be patient and wait and know how to act, and that but we still see that he's growing. Like he almost breaks uh, by calling King Bull Sparrow a stupid fool. Dunwing has to remind him, no, he's not. So, so we do have Matthias still growing in this and still learning things and not and having to still patiently endure. But but it's really interesting. I like that moment near the end of the chapter where Matthias even is a little proud that he's even gotten King Bull Sparrow to say his actual name because he just calls him Mouseworm throughout most of the chapter, but he finally calls him Matthias, which kind of is really interesting that he would even consent to that. But it's almost like in a moment of revelry and proudness that he kind of won over uh, Matthias by giving him the belt. That he kind of just for a minute, second there slips, and he calls Matthias by his real name. I really like that bit, and even just hearing that, Matthias is like yes. And so there's progress being made. He learns, of course, about the scabbard, the sword, but he's still we're left on a cliffhanger of him still needing to get his escape and get the scabbard. So that's really all fun stuff. Um, Let me see what else in this chapter that I really wanted to touch on. Um, yeah, I really like especially the relationship between him and Dunwing in this chapter. I think it's really revealing and revealing again of sparrow culture versus culture, but also how they can be similar. What they really care about is each other. Then we have Matthias also, of course, learning about the real location of the sword, which is with Asmodeus. I really like this again, like, and it was kind of what I was saying earlier. If you now being explained to us is the idea that the adder is a mythic yet factual reality. There's a mythic reality and a factual reality to adders and to snakes in the Redwall universe. That there's something that they perceive as they can't interact on the same level because they're just such of a different nature. Compared to and Matthias even makes a comment that like the abbot wouldn't even treat a snake. And it's almost like there's something in snakes that inherently seeks only to kill and destroy. It's not even vermin, because vermin at least have some. They're doing it out of selfish motive, but they at least have something that is relatable in terms of general character, in terms of how we relate, in terms of greed or pride, or something that we can cling to as a um, society as being at least understandable. Um, while adders in this universe are not understandable, they're so otherworldly, and they seek only death to the point where it's just how they live. Death is their domain, and that's where they live, and they can't don't live outside of that reality. Uh, but yeah, so there's that Matthias finding out finally about the snake, and of course this is going to be one of the big obstacles. So now Matthias is aware of that obstacle as well. Um, and so we have something even to look forward to now, even beyond is Matthias gonna escape King Bull Sparrow? We're now at the edge of like, well, even if he gets the scabbard, how is he gonna get away from a giant adder? Um, so we have two kind of things running in our head by the end of the chapter. Is like, okay, Matthias, you're planning to escape now. Okay, you're gonna escape. What next? So that'll take some discussion. And so yeah. Yep. Um, but yeah, I think that's it. Alrighty. I just wanted to get that chapter out at least because that's a big chapter. It kind of goes through a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff to talk about. Things I wanted to bring up because we're meeting. There's a lot of backstory and things that are going to be important later, or we just have just newly been introduced to in terms of characters. So there we are. There is chapter 16. And so next time we'll go much faster and at least get through the next three or four, hopefully. But yeah, I wanted to do an extra long one on chapter 16 because it's kind of a highlight chapter. All right. Thanks so much for watching and see you next time on Badgers and Bells.